astonishing speech from a Democrat talking about progress and the fight for a patronage system. We'll go next to Kun Aitim, if I may. You're the part of the Progressive Party, the Move Forward Party that has, that of course, a lot of people were expecting to be government initially after the election, but then now this. So, what's your view, sir?
Yep. So, firstly, I want to thank the FCCT for having me here today. It'll be a very refreshing panel to hear opinions from all of you as well as fellow panelists as well. I won't begin by talking too much into what has happened in the past. I think that has probably been quite clear to all of you already, although happy to answer any questions you may have about what happened during the government formation process. But I want to just start off by recapping about where we are today and what are the potential challenges that we might see going into the future. I think what is now clear is that we are in an era of a new government. But whether that new government will lead us to a new Thailand, I think remains to be seen. I think if you want to catch glimpses of what the future of Thailand looks like, there are probably about 4 important documents or 4 important milestones that you can evaluate and study. Two of which I think we have already seen or are already starting to see. The first one, of course, is the policy statement that was presented to Parliament across 2 days, across Monday and Tuesday. The second document, I think, or the second piece of evidence are the cabinet resolutions that will soon be coming up. I think we saw glimpses of the first week cabinet meetings resolutions being released through the press throughout today. But I think for the first few weeks, I think what cabinet decides to do, I think will very much set the tone for what will happen going into the future. The third important piece of evidence is something which I think is quite new and was mentioned by the Prime Minister in his closing speech yesterday, is that he is committed to Parliament that he will get all the ministries to come up with a clear action plan, with clear time frame to answer questions that many members of Parliament had about his policy. So I think hopefully that will be made public so that the people can evaluate and ask further questions regarding the details of the policies. And I think the fourth piece of document which will be important will be the budget that will be presented to Parliament in what I believe will now be in January, which is quite a few months late or a few months later than what would normally be expected, but that's of course because the new government took quite a while to get into place, so that's understandable. So I think for me those are the 4 important pieces of evidence which I think we can all use to assess what the new Thailand or what the future of Thailand would look like. Now, having studied and assessed the policy statement in detail, as well as looking at the first set of cabinet resolutions that have come out today, I think initially I have 2 broad concerns that I want to share in this kind of opening remark. The first concern that I have is that it seems that the direction of this government is rather unclear. And I think there are a lot of details missing that would provide that clarity to people to see what the next 4 years would look like. The evidence I have for this is actually the policy statement, which is actually in front of me here today. It consists of about 14 pages of what the government wants to do with the country over the next 4 years. This document is a very important piece of document because it is a social contract that the government is providing or is giving to the public about what it wants to do. I think upon quite detailed assessment, we noticed that there are many things missing that we hoped would have been in there that would have provided the clarity that I think the public would have wanted to see. I'll give you 5 examples. The first one I think is missing is targets which we can use to measure the success of this government's policy. If we look at Pheu Thai, which is the main party in the government and their campaigns during the election, we see that they have often talked about a target of growing the economy by 5% per year. Right? Whether you think that's achievable or not, I think that's everyone's right. But at least they were very clear about where they wanted to take the country. That target is actually missing from this policy document. And in this document, there are no specific indicators or KPIs which they have committed, which we can use to measure the success of the next 4 years. The second information that's missing are the numbers that back up different policies. So for example, we saw in the election campaign, Pheu Thai, the main party in the government, were very clear about a lot of policies and the numbers behind it. They were very clear that they wanted to increase minimum wage to 600 baht per day by the end of the government term, or within 4 years. They were very, very clear that they wanted to increase the salary for graduates to 25,000 baht per month. But if you look in this policy statement, you will see that those numbers are not present at all. It only talks about broad sentences saying that they will try to increase the minimum wage and salary to a reasonable level, or to a level that's in line with the cost of living. So there's a lack of commitment in the numbers behind their policies. And this is quite unusual, especially if you compare to the previous Pheu Thai government, which I think Kun Suranan can share more about, where actually in their policy statement, they committed very clearly, which is according to what they campaigned before, that they would try to raise minimum wage to 300 baht, and were clear about putting the numbers behind their policies. I think the third piece of information that's missing is an action plan. So for example, it talks broadly about understanding the issues relating to the constitution, but it doesn't talk about the details, or it doesn't lay out the details as to how they would try to resolve that issue. So despite the campaign being heavily revolved around the idea of having an elected constitutional drafting assembly being set in place to draft a new constitution, even a mention of that constitution drafting assembly is missing from this government. The fourth one is the time frame. So normally governments would divide their policies into urgent policies that need to be done immediately and policies that would be done across the 4 years. But normally they would put quite a clear time frame as to what they mean by urgent policies. So for example, to refer back to the previous Pheu Thai government, they were very clear that for the urgent policies that they laid out, these were expected to be completed within 1 year. In this current policy statement, it divides policies into 3 time frames, so short term, medium term, and long term. But there are no specific details as to how many years, how many days, how many months are to be used to measure what we define as short term, medium term, long term. And I think finally, the fifth observation I have, fifth piece of information that is missing from this document, are some of the highlight are some of the key policies that were used during the election campaign. So for example, Pheu Thai talked a lot about moving towards a system where we have elected governors in some of the provinces of the 77 provinces in Thailand. That's missing from this document. Pheu Thai talked a lot about their soft power or creative economy policies. Some of them are in here, but one notable missing policy is the idea to set up what they call TACA, which is a new agency to try and coordinate and support creative workers in the creative industry. So I think all in all, those are just kind of quick examples of what is missing from this policy statement, which I think backs up my first observation that the direction of this new government is quite unclear. And I think for me, the cause behind this, I think it's because this government is a coalition of many parties who have had quite tangible and substantial differences in political ideology and policies over the past 4 years. And they probably have not had enough time to discuss among themselves and agree on the compromises that needed to be made. And hence, when the deadline's up and they need to present a policy to Parliament, they had to come up with very broad statements to make sure that, it covers, or it is in the statement that all parties who may have differences in their policy stance and political stance can at least accept it as government policy. So I think that's the first of the 2 observations that I have. The second key observation that I have is that what is at least partially clear in this policy statement, I think is still quite worrying given the challenges that Thailand is facing. I summarize into 4 key challenges and as to why I feel that the current set of policies may not be able to solve those 4 key challenges. The first challenge, I think, is to do with short-term economic recovery. So trying to stimulate the economy and inject some growth into the economy to increase people's incomes and ensure that they are relieved of the economic hardship that has lingered since the COVID period. I think on this first challenge, I have two broad concerns, and we can go into details later. I think the first concern I have is that
และมีจุดเด่นกว่านั้นคือไม่เคยคุยโตโอ้อวดทำงานก็ไม่ชอบเอาหน้า